For all of us, it's about predicting where the consumer is going and getting half of it right.
One of the things we want to do is create ads that don't suck.
Embracing change creates great possibility.
I'm Alan Hart, and this is Marketing Today.
Today on the show, I've got Bill Macaitis. Bill was previously the Chief Marketing Officer and Chief Revenue Officer at Slack. Before that, Chief Marketing Officer at Zendesk. And before that, Senior Vice President of Marketing at Salesforce.com. He's had 5 exits over his career. And today on the podcast, we talk about what he's up to now, which is a lot of advisory work because he obviously doesn't need to work after that many successful exits, what kinds of projects he's excited about. We also talk about lessons and tips and things he's learned along the way in terms of scaling a business, building your marketing tech stack, and much, much more. I hope you enjoy this conversation with Bill Macaitis. Well, Bill, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Alan.
So I have to start with just the highlights. Slack, Zendesk, Salesforce. That's 3 exits just in the last 3 companies. So we got to start with before we get there, where did you start your career and what was the path towards those 3 most recognizable names that most listeners know or are using today?
Yeah, sure. So actually before those 3 on the B2B side, I did about 10 years on the B2C side. So I did my first startup right out of college. Co-founded it with a couple of my friends. And that was before the days that I knew there were things that were called VCs that would give you money for a portion of your company. So it was a great actually lesson in, bootstrapping and scaling a company without a lot of funds. And I think that really helped shape me to help grow and how to grow, but do it efficiently. So spent some time there. That was a company called Cases Ladder. We grew it to about 10 million members. We had an early subscription model. We were profitable. We ended up selling that. Then spent some time for some large media sites. So as part of a leading marketing for IGN Entertainment that had sites like IGN.com, Ask Men, Rotten Tomatoes. Grew that up to about 100 million in revenue, sold that to News Corp, and then went over to News Corp to lead up online marketing for a number of their sites. So everything from Fox Sports, Wall Street Journal, American Idol, all of the previous IGN sites. It was just an incredible opportunity to help build a really large network. And we built it up to, I think, the 3rd largest in the world. And, that's when I got the call from Mark over at Salesforce. And, the entire team there was just building something special. And I kind of made a pivot over to the B2B side of the house.
Got it. So 10 years on the consumer side and, making that shift, if you will, from News Corp and maybe Fox Sports and those types of properties to Salesforce, that seems like a big jump. Was that consumer marketing something they were looking for, or was it the digital aspects? Like, what was the pivot there?
Yeah, so I think Salesforce and Mark really wanted to bring in some consumer DNA into the company. It's something I've always respected about Mark is that he's constantly innovating, constantly disrupting. And it was kind of a big leap for me because, at the time, SaaS in the cloud wasn't nearly as widespread. And really, Salesforce, I think, was the pioneer for that movement. But I just really believed in it at the time. It made sense. I mean, you have to remember there was this world where enterprises literally used to buy software that you would install on disk to their own servers and have massive IT teams that would run these deployments. And, here comes this beautifully simple model of running things out of the cloud. And so I just want to be part of that movement, and coming into Salesforce in the early days was just an incredible experience for me.
That's awesome. So I know you went from Salesforce, I think the sequence was Salesforce to Zendesk to Slack.
Yeah.
And as you kind of moved from one to the other, and I believe it was at Slack, you actually took on the CRO role.
Yeah.
So scaling businesses, when you're the CMO, and then when you become, CRO, which I'm assuming means you have sales under you as well. What are the secrets or the tips that you could share to other CMOs that are kind of in that same role or taking on that role?
Yeah, sure. So, kind of clarify my role at Slack, I was basically CMO/CRO. And what that meant is I ran all the customer facing teams. So sales, marketing, success, support. We really liked it because it aligned all of these customer facing teams to be under one leader, and it allowed us to take a really customer-centric based approach. My philosophy, I don't know if I have like shortcuts or tricks, but I always just tried to approach marketing with that. It's constantly innovating, and we should innovate our marketing and our go-to-market as much as we do on the product side. And right now, so many great, incredible SaaS companies out there, but I have seen a lot of companies, especially in the B2B space, that just kind of adopt a 30-year-old dusty B2B playbook, centered around press releases and field events and top-down, outbound sales. And I think there's just so much innovation that's happening, and it's fun to kind of reinvent what go-to-market looks like. So, I can tell you some of the things that worked really well for us. The first was maybe disrupting or innovating on just basic pricing and packaging, right? One of the things we tried at Slack was innovating the free trial. So most in that day, B2B free trials were either time-bound or user-bound. And we tried innovating and just say, hey, you can have 10,000 people on Slack if you want, and you can use it for as long as you want. There's still a free plan for you. That was very different. And then think about what are the upgrade drivers that come later on that help people and encourage people to move up. That was a bit different. We tried something where if you stopped using the product, if you're an SMB and, they're always going to be price sensitive, but if you stopped using the product, we would give credits and refunds back for the users that stopped using it. And so I think we had either a 10 or 14-day active usage. And basically, if someone stopped using it for 14 days, we would send a credit back to the admin and say, hey, Judy has stopped using the product. Here's a credit back. And that was pretty radically different, right?
That is radically different.
If you would kind of go to most, CFOs and say, hey, we're going to do that, I think their minds would explode with the revenue recognition issues. But being a startup, it was just we want to do something very customer centric. And we really like the idea that we don't get paid unless our customers are getting value out of it. And for us, it wasn't about did they just sign up? It was really about are they getting utility and are they using it every day? So that's an area that I think is really important that I find that helped out a lot. Another, I think, is just on the brand side. So I work with a lot of companies now, kind of in my advisory capacity. And so many B2B companies, I think, feel they need to play it safe and take a very sterile, bland approach because maybe they're moving up market or they're selling to enterprise and, hey, we can't have any personality or any brand or any color. And I actually think that's a great opportunity you have to stand out. You got to understand, anyone that has success in a space, you're going to have 10 competitors overnight because the VCs are so good at identifying, which companies are doing well and where they can deploy additional capital. And so I love the idea of standing out. And it's something we tried differently at Zendesk. I mean, when I was there, we had a massive green Buddha saying, love your help desk. And that was very different than the Oracle customer support of the day, and at Slack, you had this really bold tartan plaid. Slack had a very distinctive editorial tone and voice. It was whimsical and fun, and we would write fun release notes that you might actually want to read, or even a loading message of the day, right? That was just a little different, made you smile, as opposed to just having a little hourglass sitting there waiting for the app to load up. Have some fun with it. So I think on the branding side, there's a lot of opportunities there. And then maybe the last thing I'd say is just, I really believe in this idea of being customer centric. Something Mark always preached to us at Salesforce was, it's all about the customer success. And I love this idea of thinking about the brand as the sum of all these little experiences that someone has with your company. And that impacts marketing, sales, success support, legal, product. But I love the idea of optimizing around those experiences, coming up with the right metrics, and really pivoting. Because ultimately in SaaS, it's not about how much money you make from the customer when they sign up with you, right? It's these recurring revenue streams and lifetime value, and then getting them to go out and talk about you and recommend you. It's so more important that it is have a great experience and recommend you. So I love that customer-centric philosophy.
That's great. And on the brand front, I mean, the whimsicalness that you're talking about building into the product messages, as well as the look and the feel of the brand and tone of it. Was that something you brought with you from the consumer world, or where did that come from?
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely strongly influenced by a lot of my experiences on the consumer side, where I think you see a lot more brands that are willing to take some risks, willing to develop an emotional connection with their users, willing to have some fun. And I think me coming into B2B and these different startups, one of the reasons I loved this coming into Slack, it was kind of, marketing person number one. So you had pretty much a blank slate to be able to kind of create the brand, the visual identity, the look, the feel, the interactions. And we spent a lot of time trying to codify that editorial tone and voice. And not only that, but really scaling it. So it's great if one person knows it, but training all the people in customer facing roles. So marketing, support, success, sales, all on what our tone and voice is, even metricing some of those teams based on how well they adhere to it, right? Like, so even for support, we would do things like, retroactively look at tickets that came in and go, hey, did this customer support agent, how well did they speak in our tone and voice? Were they friendly and have empathy? Was it a fun tone? Did they not use any acronyms? That's something we always tried to stay away from, and just tried to make it scale so we could train everyone, certify them, and make sure that was consistent as we continue to grow and scale.
Got it. Well, I imagine you are demonstrated the ability of scale, right? And scale within the organization, scale of the business itself, and driving that through marketing and other aspects of the company. So I imagine you very well understand marketing operations and the technologies that work best. And just want to kind of do a, what if scenario, right? Hypothetical. If, let's say I'm a new company, I've got some traction in the market, I'm looking to scale, or maybe even I'm a company that just needs to improve its efficiency of my marketing.
Yeah.
Are there technologies or processes that you'd go to, you'd turn to, or in general, where would you start?
Yeah. So first off, I'm a huge advocate of building sophisticated marketing tech stacks. I think a lot of it centers back to what I talked about earlier. When I did that first startup, my own experience was when we co-founded was we just didn't have a lot of money and we couldn't throw people at problems. Right. And as we were growing and scaling really fast, we had to think about what is the tech that's going to allow us to grow and scale and develop these customer relationships and be targeted. And so everybody kind of does the basics, the CRM, maybe the marketing automation, but I love going a couple steps further, where you think about things like, predictive lead scoring and multi-touch attribution and multivariate testing and heat maps, voice of the customer, NPS surveys. I feel like there's just so much great marketing tech out there. And a lot of it's been the result of this movement to the cloud, where you do have these incredible best of breed, consumer friendly type products that have been democratized so that anybody in the SMB space or above has access to them. So I think it's incredible. There's never been a better time to run a business right now, and having a full, robust marketing tech stack is what's going to allow you to grow and scale efficiently.
Right. And so if you've got the tech stack figured out, so to speak, the core functions, right? The CRM, the marketing automation, what are some of the things that you've used that maybe those extras that you talked about or mentioned?
Yeah. So I love for predictive lead scoring. I love Infer. I think they're fantastic. They take a very Google-based approach and don't just look at lead scoring as, all right, what pieces of content have they read, and we're going to give you a score for them. They look at 100 different signals. They'll look at, every page they've been to. Have they been in the product? How much are they using the product? What type of company are they? How have those leads historically converted from that company? What pieces of content are they looking at? Just hundreds of different signals to help give you this ongoing real-time lead score that's changing. I think that's super powerful. On the multi-touch attribution side, there's one thing that's actually frustrated me when I really started learning about attribution and B2B is that, most people that have been part of B2B software for a while, intrinsically know that you don't just, someone doesn't see your product and decide to buy you that day. It takes time. And when I worked at Salesforce, we had to really build our own internal multi-touch attribution software. We were very security and InfoSec. We had to be really careful which third-party tools we use, which meant we had to build some of them in-house. And one of the things that I discovered was that people would interact with us for maybe 3 months before they would become a lead. And then it might be another 6 months until they bought from us. And that was just a much longer horizon. And if you think about it, the predominant method in B2B, and some people, still kind of use this as just either first or last touch. And so you have maybe 30 touches amongst 9 months, and you're giving all the credit to first or last, which, by the way, is, I think, one of the reasons why Google SEM is so huge, because everybody does either a brand search at the very end, and Google claims all the credit for it. Anyways, they have their own good attribution software too, but I just think those are two good examples of I think we can go a couple layers deeper and just be much more sophisticated and targeted with your tech.
Gotcha. And what if you were advising somebody on multi-touch attribution, are there things that you learned? I mean, there's all different ways to do it, right?
Yeah.
And I'm sure it probably depends on the business that you're in and all the activities along that buy cycle, so to speak. But are there any general rules of thumb or tips that you could give out?
From my experience, I think the first thing going in is there is no magic bullet. There's nothing that will give you 100% certainty. You're just trying to increase your degree of confidence. And it gets difficult because attribution spans so many different lenses. You have online versus offline. You have digital, you have video, you have audio, you have laptop versus personal device. And all the different attribution vendors are good at some areas, not good at others. But I found that, for me, I like the movement towards linear regression modeling. So it'll look at every single touch across every single deal. And then it'll start to see, okay, what are the touches that tended to influence the biggest deals that closed the fastest, that were our best type customers. Even attribution modeling that will catch view-throughs. A lot of times if you do a display-heavy marketing plan or even like a content-heavy marketing plan, those are classic nurturers, middle steps. So you have to be able to make sure that, it's catching when someone actually sees your ad, maybe doesn't click on it, but moves you through there. So, ultimately, I just like a much more sophisticated multi-touch modeling. That being said, there's easy ways to do this too. It doesn't have to be super high tech. We use things like at Slack. We would do, in addition to that, we would do something simple like, hey, after you signed up, hey, where'd you hear about us? Was it a billboard on 101? Did you see us in our ad in Fortune? Did you read a piece of content? It was a news article. And that was a nice additional signal. We would also do things like run campaigns in, 3 sister cities. So let's say like Austin, Denver, and Seattle, and then compare those to control groups of cities that never got any of the advertising, and try to understand like, hey, what was the lift in all the traditional funnel metrics, leads, pipeline, et cetera. But then also what was the lift in brand metrics, which I think you can track, things like aided recall or unaided recall or sentiment. And we got very scientific at it, essentially like, how much did a point of awareness cost us to try to grow that overall awareness. So I think there's a lot of different ways you can do it. It's just, I think, having a dedication to putting yourself towards it.
Right. That makes sense. One of the areas you kind of touched on a little bit in a couple of questions now, but one of the areas that it seems hotly debated and argued is this notion of brand marketing versus performance marketing. And I'm curious, I know you've used things like TV in the past to, advertise SaaS type products. So where do you land on that front?
Yeah, it's a really fun debate. I think even just advertising in B2B is often debated, right? Can you do consumer style advertising? And, in a lot of ways, not to get too meta, but I think in some ways, marketing is really just automated sales. And so for us at Slack, in a lot of ways, we definitely use sales. A lot of people think we didn't, but we did. But for us, we had almost like a consumer type product because the TAM was so large. Essentially anyone that worked at a company and had used email and wanted it to do a better way. So for us, consumer style plays like these larger advertising plays worked really well with it. And I think that allowed us to make that dedication towards the advertising to help us grow in areas where maybe we didn't have an existing footprint. We were getting into a new country or a new geo or a new vertical. As far as like brand versus, performance lead gen, personally, like my view on that has evolved over the years. Like I actually think that lead gen is short-term leads and brand is long-term leads. Right. It's a little bit harder to build a long-term brand. Doesn't mean you can't measure it. Like I said, I think there's really great metrics out there, and there's, actually simple ways to do it now that don't cost that much. But having, when you create a brand that someone loves, that they have an emotional connection to, they're going to recommend you more. They're going to buy more from you. They're willing to pay a higher price with you. They're going to attrit less. All these classic SaaS metrics just get so much better. And I think, you just have to kind of have that long-term viewpoint. And that's hard. I get it. Like a lot of companies, under incredible pressures and, have VCs and you have to hit this quarter's numbers. So a lot of times the budgets shift towards that short term, let's just get these leads in. But ultimately, I think if you can have a more customer-centric brand focus, you can create these iconic brands that just fundamentally are growing faster.
Right. Performance marketing, the notion I get is you can't live without it. obviously, because you need to drive leads, short-term leads in the near term. But it sounds like the balancing act for you, at least as you described at Slack as well, was trying to build the brand and make sure you're driving sales at the same time, and not to put words in your mouth, but balancing that throughout the entire life cycle of the scaling process. Is that true? Or
yeah, I mean, I think the way I would describe it is, you have to look at these as a journey. Again, someone doesn't just see you one time and go out and buy you, especially as you move more up market, right, to mid-market and enterprise. So, it's a journey. I think what I'm saying is, you have to have that combination of brand and performance. Performance is kind of like at the end. That's when you're harvesting that interest. And a lot of times that's where your CTAs are, free trial, start now, 20% off, whatever it is. But before that, there's a lot of steps along that journey. And that's an opportunity to help educate your users about your space. That's where you see a lot of great content marketing come in. That's where you have an opportunity to, make them laugh, smile a little bit. If you look at anyone kind of listening to this, if you search kind of Slack Amazing Teams on YouTube, you can kind of see some of the videos we did for that. And they're, they're not like a typical B2B ad. there's animals and stuff, there's fun music, hopefully you're laughing and smiling a little bit, but that emotion is transferring over to the brand. That was always our hope. So I think you just have to look at these holistically, and there's a place for both of those. But I think if you only do one or the other, that's where you can get in a little bit of trouble.
Got it. Well, you mentioned customer centricity before. I want to bring that back up because as I talk to a lot of CMOs, many of them are focused on customer centricity efforts or trying to drive enterprise-wide transformation along that journey for the first time. And curious what you would advise them, because it seems like in prior roles, you've been primarily responsible for marketing. As you progressed, you got more and more functional responsibility. And how did you lead across the organization, maybe in those earlier days? And then, what was it like when you actually got the control, so to speak?
Yeah. So I am tickled pink that you have so many other leaders now and great companies are kind of embarking on this customer-centric focus. Mm-hmm. I think for a long time, especially in B2B software, we were not optimizing for customer centricity. We were, putting every single piece of content behind a gate. You had to fill out 20 fields. Sales would call you before you even had a chance to look up what the product does. If you do buy it, you're assigned 1/1000th of a customer success person. And, if you try to find the support link, it's in like 4-point font and, it's 3 weeks before you get a response. So I definitely think we need some more customer centricity in our space, because ultimately it's no longer about the short-term sale. SaaS has just changed the model where it's about lifetime value now, and it's about recommendations and moving into new products and add-ons, upgrade, expansion. You have to view this as a long-term journey, and customer centricity is just a way of doing that, a way of thinking about, hey, what are all these experiences that we're giving to our customers and how can we get them to recommend you? At Slack, I was definitely the evangelist, the advocate for the customer centricity. In our internal Slack instance, if you do, :Bill, a little NPS sign would show up. That's how much I loved NPS and talked about it there. Net Promoter Score, for those listening that aren't familiar with it. But I love that because it was a simple question. It's literally one question. I don't like filling out 30-page surveys. So just a simple question, how like you to recommend Slack to a friend or colleague. And then the why question, which had all this treasure trove of data. I think it's great to be able to say, hey, you want to be customer centric, but then actually acting on it is much harder, right? Because you have to start thinking about what are the right metrics we're going to track. Like NPS is one of them. We used a lot of transactional CSAT. We would survey people after large sales deals and be like, hey, Judy was your account executive. How knowledgeable was she? And how helpful was she? How courteous was she, right? We wanted to have another signal around experience for salespeople beyond just did they close the deal. Because I think we've all had great experience with salespeople and we've all had bad experience with salespeople. And we want to try to optimize around that. But where it gets tricky then is now this customer centricity is really hitting all these different teams, right? And I don't think NPS is a marketing metric. I think it's a CEO metric. So it's hard. And a lot of it just depends on the company. But if you've kind of come from a little more older school company, being a champion for something like NPS can be really hard. There's a lot of sacred cows. You have teams that are now being maybe judged differently. You're changing a lot of the workflows, the process, and you have to be an advocate, a huge evangelist, and you have to view it almost as like a massive change management exercise. So I have a lot of empathy for all the other people out there that are trying to lead these initiatives in-house. It's something what I do now, kind of my advisory business. I help companies with that, amongst a lot of other things. But it's great to see the renewed focus on it.
Thank you. Thank you for those examples. I know you are doing advisory work, and not to talk about your personal situation, but I don't think you really need to work, right?
Yeah.
So, what are, your dream projects or your engagements that you would love to do?
Yeah, this is something I love doing. I hit a point where I'd been doing about 20 years and was just really fortunate. I've had about 5 exits. And so I wanted to kind of move into a different phase where I could help other great companies scale and grow their businesses. And so it's something I love doing now. For me, my dream ones are working with very customer-centric founders that have a long-term view that are, disrupting large markets. I think that's absolutely fascinating. We're just good people. Life's too short. You want to work with, especially when you're just doing it because you love it. You want to work with people that you enjoy and that, you can kind of get in the trenches with and help out. And ultimately, I just want to be proud of the work. I've got a little 8-year-old daughter, and I want her to be proud of the companies that I worked with and the impact they made on the world. And, I just feel so fortunate every day that I'm able to work with, amazing founders. Because again, this is the golden age of innovation. There's never been easier to create a startup, to disrupt large spaces. And I just think it's so exciting. I love getting up every day and helping the clients that I work with.
Got it. Well, one more question on founders, because it seems like you've worked with a number of them. You've even been a founder yourself. What is it that makes a good founder, or you could say successful founder, but success, I put in air quotes around it.
It's a broad question, right? And you see so many different founders with different backgrounds. The ones that I see are ones that really tackle spaces that just have a lot of pain in it. I think Slack's maybe a good example in that there was maybe a lot of latent pain. So, I don't run across too many people that say, I love email and I love doing a lot of meetings throughout the day. That just works awesome, right?
Right. But no one ever.
But no one was really saying I want this real-time messaging platform that can bring in all these different information and take action on it and have transparency and better productivity. There was that pain that was out there, similar, I think, in the old model with taxis, right? I'm old enough where I used to take a taxi to the airport, and that was a really stressful experience because I have to call. The first cab company wouldn't answer, the second would, but they wouldn't tell me if someone was coming out. I'm waiting. I don't know if they're going to make the flight. Should I call another one? The taxi finally shows up. I don't know what route they're taking. I don't know if they're going to take a credit card. They're not very nice to me. It was just it was this horrible experience, but we're all oh yeah, well, just what it is. You take a taxi. So I think founders that, address that latent pain have a lot of opportunity. And then I think ones that are just open to disrupting, innovative new tactics. I think those are intellectually curious people, open-mindedness. Those are the traits. And I've been super fortunate to work with some incredible founders. Mark was at Salesforce, just this incredible philanthropist, an incredibly giving person, always talked about customer success. Mikkel at Zendesk, just a great individual, learned a ton from him, and Stuart at Slack. Each of them just kind of brought unique capabilities to the table, but all of them just had hearts of gold and, really believed in the mission that we were taking on.
Got it. Well, I love getting to know the people behind the businesses that we talk to. And so I'd love to ask you my favorite question, which is has there been an experience of your past that defines or makes up who you are today?
The first thing that popped to my head there was I was the nerd in 3rd grade that was reading Fortune, Forbes, and Business Week. I don't know what it was, but I just knew that I loved business at such an early age.
That's
and
funny.
I was doing future business leaders of America and entrepreneurship contests. And it just defined me. I loved business. I could not get enough of it. It is something that I think's always shaped me to this day. Is just, I've always had kind of that intellectual curiosity for business and the great leaders out there and the tactics they're taking. And so it was probably that moment, probably when I started geeking out on that I knew I was going down the business path. That's
hilarious. You're like a real life. What was that show where it was Alex P. Keating or something like that? There was a sitcom show back in the day. I can't remember the name of it. But
I think I'm recalling too, but I can't think of it too.
I can't
remember. We'll find it. It'll be in the show notes.
Right? Yes, exactly. We'll find that. But you're like a real life version of that.
I was, yes.
Yeah. So, well, what advice would you give to your younger self?
I probably say be opportunistic. It's advice that I give to a lot of people that I mentor and help out with. And I'm just a big believer, like we live in such an incredible time. There are so many opportunities out there. And I think there's always going to be that initial resistance, that friction that kind of wants you to say, like, oh, let's just keep doing what I'm doing. But, there's so many great opportunities out there. And I think just be a little risk taker. When you see a great opportunity, go for it. And I think good things can happen.
I've got a follow-up to that, and it just came to me, which is how do you process failure? Because you have been opportunistic in your career, obviously, and you've had great success. So I'm just curious. I know there has to be days where you're like, it's just not going right. So how do you process that? You seem such a positive person.
I definitely fail every day. I make mistakes, and my daughter and wife are quick to point many of them out. So I'm always trying to
keep us grounded, right?
Yeah, they keep you grounded, definitely. I don't know. I've just always had a positive viewpoint, and like I feel like failures are good. You want to fail. You should encourage your teams to fail, to take risks. I think the hardest thing that any business has to fight against is just this inertia of just doing the same thing. And, this is our cash cow product, right? And we can't take resources away, or this has been working, so let's just keep doing it. And so failures are good, and I think when you can get to a point where you kind of just internalize that, hey, this is great. Like, failure is a learning experience. Like, you should be pushing yourself. If you're not failing, that probably means you're not pushing yourself hard enough, or you're not taking enough risks. So I love it. I think it's just the mindset. I'm a total optimist. I'm like, glass is half full. Throw me like a really hard, problem, and I'll be like, what a great opportunity, right? We can turn this around. This is great. But I don't know. I just feel fortunate. I mean, we live in such a great time, and there's such good people, and, family, and the people you work with become your family. And so I just think it's a great time to be alive.
All right. Well, what fuels you? What keeps you going?
I love helping other companies grow and scale. So I'm a big gardener as a metaphor, and I love planting things from a seed and seeing them grow to a specimen plant. And so for me, it gives me like a huge amount of reward to come and work with a company and like help them with their hiring and recruiting and interviewing and mentoring, and build like a best-in-class team, or build a best-in-class marketing tech stack, or like a world-class go-to-market strategy. Like, to me, that's exciting, and it's fun to get to know the people. It's fun to see the company grow and evolve, and have their growth increase, and kind of skyrocket toward that maybe unicorn and beyond. I just think that's super rewarding. Life's so short, and there's just so many great founders out there and teams, and I love working with them. It's something that I find super personally gratifying.
Got it. Are there brands or companies or causes that you follow, or you think other people should take notice of?
Yeah. So it's actually an interesting one. We haven't totally signed the deal yet, but I've been thinking about coming on board for a company called GetAccept. And it's a really cool thing. What they do is they basically leverage video as a part of the closing process. So when you send a deal over, I mean, so many of us would just send the PDF or a DocuSign or whatever it is, but there's nothing with it. And this allows you to like literally put like a customized message, a video. It's got the analytics. It just helps you close everything better. You can message them back and forth, and they're just a fun company. So I think that's one I'm super excited to work with. And then, I don't know, at a broader level, I think just philanthropy, I think, again, I always look to Mark and what he's done with kind of like his children's hospital, and just the level of awareness he'll bring to like all these different causes and issues. And, I try to listen to what he says and try to help out where I can.
Got it. Okay. And as a marketer, where do you see the future? Where is marketing going?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's a really hard one.
I know.
I don't know. I mean, part of me
in
is
5 years we'll come back and we'll tell you how you got it wrong, right?
The robots will be doing all of our work. So, I always come into it. I think like one of the reasons I love marketing is because it changes every year. There's always new tactics, new strategies that come about. I mean, we didn't get a chance to talk about ABM and the level of targeting you can do there, which I think is just incredible. And that's a good example. Like, that just wasn't around, a little while ago. And so I think I think the future marketing is like, hey, you have to be nimble, adaptable, always be learning. There's always new tactics out there. I do think a little bit like we talked about earlier that, this is more and more companies embrace a subscription model, both in B2B and consumer. there's just much more of a focus on their lifetime revenue, and are they attriting, and are they recommending other people? And so I really personally think the future of marketing is all around that customer centricity, marketing's role expanding beyond just, hey, did we get people in the door, to it's their entire life cycle. It's about delighting them. It's about educating them. It's about having a great relationship with them, and ultimately getting them to a point to they recommend. And, if there's one thing I would always tell all my teams at Slack was, your goal is not to get people to buy from us. Your goal is to get them to recommend us. And I just have always thought that's a higher bar and a harder bar. And I think if, the future of marketing, if more people thought about that, it would just be a great experience for everyone involved.
Yeah. Well, you sparked an idea which I had never thought about before, which is, whether or not the subscription models across B2B markets as well as B2C markets, if that's forcing us as consumers to think about our purchases every month, and which thereby may require businesses to have that long-term focus, because otherwise we'll turn it off.
Definitely.
It's kind of interesting. I hadn't thought about it like that.
Well, and I'd even argue for a lot of companies that have innovated on go-to-market model, you're doing a bottoms-up seed and grow model now, which means you're getting one small team within a large organization, right? Like Slack would maybe have a 50-person team at GE. Well, that's like 300,000 people.
Right.
You are highly incentivized to make sure that group of people have a great experience, so they recommend you, right? And then grow and scale. And so I hope, just as a consumer too, like we've all been there, either as a buyer on the B2B side or just as a consumer on B2C. And I just think the world would be a little better if, we cared about people, we try to optimize around their experience, delight them, and then, great services grow, and that's good, and reward that. And I think that's a great virtuous cycle.
I love it. Well, Bill, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Oh, Alan, it was an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Hi, it's Alan again. Marketing Today was created and produced by me, with writing and editing by Kevin Greeley, social media support by Megan Woods, art and graphic design by Sarah Dell. If you're new to Marketing Today, please feel free to write us a review on iTunes or your favorite listening platform. Don't forget to subscribe and tell your friends and colleagues about the show.
I love to hear from listeners, and you can contact me at marketingtodaypodcast.com. There you'll also find complete show notes with links to anything we talk about on any episode. You can also search our archives.
I'm Alan Hart, and this is Marketing Today.